Thank you very much for coming up again here for the talk, and I want to thank Owen for inviting me for this discussion, and Stephen also being in touch with me from the beginning to arrange this visit. So I've been really appreciate everybody your time here. So my name is Iresh, as Stephen mentioned, Owen mentioned. So yes, from the University of Auckland. So my presentation today is about red stickers and rising waters. You might wonder what does that really mean. So that's actually being I'm mentioning there because of one of the critical climate risks that we are experiencing in New Zealand, generally Auckland, is flooding. So one of my research area is actually focused on urban flooding as a result of climate change risks and how New Zealand is actually trying to tackle these sort of issues and what are the sort of opportunities and research opportunities that are emerging from that area. So before I move into to the presentation, I also want to highlight that I'm one of the research director of the Future Cities Research Center. So we have a School of Architecture and Planning. I'm from a School of Architecture and Planning. So in the school, we have a research center called Future Cities Research Center. So I'm one of the domain leader for the research center. So basically, just to give you a little idea of that, the research center focus on research on the built environment. And as a School of Architecture and Planning is as the place of the research center, we have researchers, academics from architecture, urban planning, urban design, as well as from sociology, education, social sciences, geography, all disciplines. So we are looking at research starting from the built environment, at the building scale. Obviously, we have architects working with us from a neighborhood to city and natural environments. How all these areas interconnected together is something that we will look at in the Future Cities Research Center. So we have our vision, and vision, as you see in here. Basically, there are 4 integrated themes in the Future Cities Research Center. So the first one is the sustainable, resilient, and regenerative approaches, which I am the director of that area, of the theme of that area. And we have other academics actually who are looking after the areas such as urban innovation, low carbon solution, and zero emission pathways, economy and urban well-being, space justice, and community development. So if you are doing any research in this area, and if you would like to get in touch with the Future Cities Research Center, related to those topics, feel free to talk to me. And as I said, yeah, I run the first theme there in that topic. So I try to collaborate with research here with you guys as well, if you're doing anything to do with climate adaptation, regenerative planning area. So to give a little overview of the New Zealand context, so I know most of you know where New Zealand is, but I always, when I travel overseas, I like, especially Europe, I just give you a little bit of a map of like where New Zealand is. And the capital city is Wellington, and I'm from Auckland, which is the commercial city, the largest city of New Zealand. And we have about 5.3 million population as of 2025. So I've kind of heard the island has a similar size of population, which I thought there's more opportunities to do collaborative research as well, because we are geographically similar, both island countries, island nations, population size. I think the demographics of the population pattern, we are becoming highly multicultural as well as the country. Predominantly, the Pākehā is the New Zealand European community, called from Maori name, and the Maori are predominant population. And 3 main languages: English, Te Reo Maori, which is the Maori language, and the New Zealand Sign Language. So those 3 languages are used as official languages. And from a Maori perspective, the country identifies Aotearoa. You might have heard this name before. So Aotearoa is the name for Maori name for New Zealand, which English translation is land of the long white cloud. So as we experience many cities around the globe because of the climate, so New Zealand is also is going to be projected to experience various impacts of climate. So as you see here, it's intensifying flooding, it's intensifying heat waves, it's intensifying sea level rise, droughts, you name it, all these natural hazards that could be related to climate risk is actually projected to increase for New Zealand. New Zealand is also have other natural hazards like volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, etc. But the likelihood of occurrence of those events are much more, now seems to be less frequent than when you're looking at climate risks. So we are spending a lot of economic damages because of the flooding. even though volcanic eruption could be much more severe, but it's very hard to predict when they are going to happen. So therefore, it is important to understand how frequent these severe events will come to us, and then how are we prepared for those events, because it will really understanding our community preparedness, how our economies are prepared to cope up with these issues. So in order to be prepared as a country in New Zealand, have put together a climate change commission, which is the main organization, the government organization, which primarily provide recommendation for the minister and for the government, how as a country, we should be responding to climate change. The Climate Change Commission is tasked under the Climate Change Response Act, which was established in 2002. Now, the new government, the national government, came in force 2 years ago, so they are going to do an amendment for the Climate Change Response Act. So we are waiting for what those response amendments are going to be. And according to the Climate Change Response Act, the first national climate change risk assessment was released in 2020. So it is expected to revise this assessment in 2026 again. So under the first national climate change risk assessment that came up in 2020, it had identified several high priority risk areas for New Zealand that needs to be focused on. First national adaptation plan, in order to respond to those risks, came up in 2022. So this national adaptation plan is the first one in the country, and it's also needs to be reviewed every 2 years. So the first review of the national adaptation plan came up in 2024. And according to the findings of the 2024 plan, the review of the progress of the national adaptation plan, the page 13, I quoted, that says that the climate change risks are significant and rising and remain insufficiently addressed by adaptation action in New Zealand. The Commission finds limited evidence that the first national adaptation plan is driving adaptation at the scale or pace needed. So after the 2-year review of the first national adaptation plan, we came to the conclusion that as a country, we are actually not doing enough to be able to prepare our cities, our infrastructure, our economy, our community to be able to adapt to climate, to the changing climate. So these are some of the highlights from the National Climate Change Risk Assessment that I mentioned to you, that grouped these risks under 5 value domains, which are human, natural domain, built domain, economy, and governance. So the ones that are highlighted in red, yellow, are the ones that are interested in my research. So I'm quite interested in researching, look at the social cohesion and how community well-being risks have been identified because of the displacement of various climate risks, which identified as an urgency, an extreme urgency. And things like exacerbation of existing inequities and creating new and additional inequities due to the uneven distribution of impacts as well, because we are seeing that flooding is causing some of the resettlements to be removed from places or managed retreat, relocate from different places. And when it comes to indigenous communities and different, Maori communities, this has becoming a very conflicting area. And at the same time, to look at how the build domain increased damage to buildings from extreme weather events and rising sea levels has been identified as an extremely urgent matter to be addressed. And also from a governance and domain side, the maladaptation risks has been actually increasing because of the wrong planning or frameworks that might be in place. So these are the things that I'm interested in my research to be pursuing, and also to support or provide evidence to the national risk assessment when it comes to the next review. So I want to bring you a little situation like 2023, Auckland experienced a massive severe flood event. So 51% of Aucklanders experienced this negative impacts and their families. The most severe impact was property damage or loss from flooding. 41% of the population's property were damaged from the floods. Severe weather events significantly affected individuals and whānau, so families. They are not just physically injured or physically damaged, they're also damaged from spiritually, emotionally. So these actually results come from a council survey which Auckland Council undertaken after the 2023 floods. So by undertaking this community survey around that, this is what the results are reported. This is not research that I've undertaken, but it's come from the impacts and needs of Aucklanders following 2023 flood events from the Auckland Council report. So it is also identified that 46% of impacted Aucklanders struggle with psychological well-being, primarily influenced by personal health, mental distress, loneliness, income inadequacy, and social connections. So even though the flood has happened 2 years ago, when we researched these communities, they are still going through that mental trauma of losing their property because of the floods, and there were lots of properties have been identified as uninhabitable. So people have to evacuate into temporary accommodation, and some people still in those sort of emergency places. So that has not just caused them a physical damage, but there's a lot of mental and emotional damage as well. So we have to be very careful when we're undertaking research with these communities to be respectful their the recovery post-disaster recovery process that they're experiencing. So based on the 2023 floods, the government then wanted to undertake a plan to respond to that. So what the government did was they came up with a plan of property categorization. So property categorization really the government wanted to identify where the properties that might not be suitable for habitation, or what properties could be recovered or can be repaired to be able to habitat. So that was a prioritization project that government came up, and Auckland has severely impacted from this flooding. So as a result of that, this categorization listed or stickered properties that are on the community. So the properties that are listed red are the most serious one, which are the properties that are in high risk category, that are not safe to live in because of the unacceptable risk of future flooding and loss of life. So I think around 7,000 properties were identified under this property categorization. Around 3,500 properties definitely received one of those categories, like the yellow ones are risk can be managed with flood protection or land stabilization in general. The yellow category ones are the white ones, which means people can return to their homes without much changes. But the critical issue is the category 3. When it comes to property value in Auckland, usually average property value in Auckland is like $1 million properties. And some of the properties are not insured as well, because some of people, especially who are living in areas vulnerable to flooding, are not socioeconomically rich. Some of the areas are very deprived areas from the socioeconomical point of view. But when council wanted to remove these people, council had to pay for these properties as well. And there was a lot of complicated happens with some properties are not insured, but at the same time, some of the properties are not cheap as well for councils to buy. So government gave the council $200 billion US dollars, New Zealand dollars actually to the property buyout process. So this is the intervention that came out. There were about 100 properties council had to buy out completely. And later on, council introduced a blue-green network project to convert those properties or the lands into some of the nature-based solutions, because these properties located in a place that are very exposed to flooding, so wouldn't be able to build. But that was a very expensive process. So even though flooding is like, when compared to other natural hazards that we experience in New Zealand, like earthquakes, volcanoes, flooding might sound like actually not a serious issue, but when it seems to be like how frequent flooding is going to be happening, now actually these days we are having heavy rainfall again. I'm hearing that some places are actually getting flooded again. So this is becoming an ongoing issue, and economically it's becoming a huge threat as well. And we have 12 people loss of lives as well from the 2023 floods. So based on that, my research is also around the climate change risks. And this research we undertaken 2 years ago. Since the post-2023 floods, actually, I got a research grant from the university to undertake the risk perception of the people in terms of climate change. So what I did study an area which was highly impacted from floods. And I wanted to understand, based on these increasing natural hazard risks, the climate risks, what are the understanding, how people understand the risk of climate change. And depending on their understanding, the level of understanding, what sort of actions the community, the people want to take in terms to mitigate those risks. So I've surveyed and had a team of researchers. This paper got published, I think, 2 weeks ago in the International Journal of Disaster Risk Research, which we're very happy with the outcome. And you can also read and see the findings from the paper. But primarily, we looked at developing a theoretical framework dimension of climate risk perception around cognitive understanding, emotional understanding, experimental coping, and social trust. So we looked at this different theoretical framework, how risk perception has been studied, and then we developed this framework, and then we delivered a questionnaire survey, and we interviewed people as well to understand how people, from these dimensions respond to that. And based on the study, we identified that some of the I see the mouse coming through, but that's okay. I got some notes from the paper. That's fine. So we identified that people actually, Maori and people from Pacifica and Maori backgrounds have a huge understanding of flooding or the risk of climate change as well. But at the same time, they don't have trust on the governance, the trust on the institutions who will look after them. So that is actually, even though people have high understanding about the risk that they're exposed to, and they are not trust towards the organization, to the institutions, they will look after them in a flood event. And people with high education level, a good income level, have a very sort of lower understanding of, like, they had a really good understanding of that they are going to experience floods, and because of the education, the wealth, they actually didn't really put much effort into mitigation action. So that also causing problem, because when these people wants to be able to experience some flooding effects, so how do we communicate to people with education, people with good income as well, their lives also going to be still experience flooding as well. So it's sort of like having a strong understanding doesn't mean that they will be recovered from flooding as well. From the people point of view, they won't feel the confidence from the institutional level. They will be looked after. But when the perception is lower, because they have enough financial capacity, the education level to cope up with, that's also causing problems as well when we want to remove these people from the places that are exposed to. So this is sort of the idea that we got from this research. And then when it comes to adaptation, managed retreat or relocation actually has been really a priority for New Zealand. And then the other issues that arise from the climate adaptation practices is the climate injustice, the climate justice, because people who are actually least contributed to climate change has getting the severe impact from it as well. So therefore, this research which I undertaken with one of my colleagues in the university, Nick Parsons, and the other research paper was just myself. We look at when government wants to use, actually globally, most adaptation policies uses the relocation or managed retreat as a proposed strategy in response to climate adaptation to put people into safe places. But this often happens without clear consultation with the people, especially when there are communities who are attached to a place, attached to a particular a community, because they have this sense of belonging into a place as well. So when you're looking at the different aspects of the so we draw in this paper different submissions from the Maori groups that submitted to the National Adaptation Plan to understand how indigenous climate justice has been taken into consideration when it comes to adaptation planning practices. So we've looked at it from different dimensions, like the procedural justice, distributive justice, recognition justice, restorative, epistemic, and multi-species justice, and intergenerational justice. So we analyzed 7 dimensions of climate justice by looking at the submissions that Maori community have put together against the National Adaptation Plan, as well as the parliamentary inquiry to climate adaptation, to see how Maori voices, Maori knowledge has been integrated into adaptation planning policy. And actually, we realized that is very weak. So it is not actually being a priority at the moment. And the other paper which I published is looking at just not Maori, the other ethnic diversities. Because when it comes to cities that are highly multicultural, people come from various experiences, various lived experiences. So when it comes to different lived experience from different places, different countries, and they bring their life experiences to the place they are living. So when we are, as a policy planners, develop a policy that, a one framework fits all, so that's actually not going to be working when the cities are becoming highly multicultural. So in this research, I wanted to look at how climate adaptation policies are looked at from an ethnic diversity point of view, what sort of community have been consulted, and what are the voices and how people, requirements and the perception have been taken into adaptation policy. And that also seems to be really not good. We are doing in a very equal way. So these are the findings from that research paper, which both papers are actually online, so you can read more. So moving from that, I also work as a planning practitioner in the council. So this paper is focused on some of my work, that how land use planning integrate nature-based solutions, because I'm also interested about water-sensitive design, nature-based solutions. How can we integrate those processes into our land use planning, and how policies could deliver a better water-sensitive outcomes in order to manage those flooding and stormwater effects. So these papers actually came through from my practical experience working as a practitioner and then now back in the academia. So we still find that there are lots of missed opportunities when it comes to land use planning, that we do not prioritize areas that we need to be looking at from a nature-based point of view. We are actually building on inappropriate places, and then we pay the cost for relocation when the places are intensified. And New Zealand cities are not very historical. Auckland is 100 years old, so we are actually repeating some of the major mistakes that some of the white, ancient cities like Europe actually have been done. So which is a quite frustration part when it comes to plan. So we need to bring this evidence to our decision makers. One of the other work is I'm also a contributing author for the new IPCC special report they're coming up with. So this is going on. So we spent last year drafting the first author draft, and now the report is on the review. So we are getting feedback this year, and hopefully the report is supposed to be released in March 2027. So I myself, Sarah Bell, and Samantha Sharp actually are the chapter 5 authors. So that is another significant achievement for me to contribute from a New Zealand lens, how different cities, types, and regions could be bringing up different solutions to climate adaptation from this. And this is another research project that I'm working with my colleague. It is about identifying the barriers and facilitators for delivering a resilient house, resilient home. So we want to go beyond a house from a structure point of view. We need to look at a house from a community point of view. So rather than looking at the safety and the resilience of a physical structure, we wanted to identify house as a place of, belonging, as a place of a community. So this research was funded by one of the external organizations. So we are looking at identify full range of barriers and facilitators to identify what could become a resilient home in the New Zealand context. So this research is still ongoing. As I mentioned earlier, one of the high risk areas is the property damage from flooding. So when it comes to houses, 100 houses being bought out, and each house at least $1 million property. So if we keep bringing, boarding house means it's not going to be a sustainable solution. So we need to fix that. So therefore, we wanted to see how can we deliver a resilient homes in terms of, future climate impacts that are coming up. So this research is still ongoing and what we are working on. And this is the new research that I'm focusing on as well. So this research is pretty much trying to look at climate adaptation from a transformational lens. So I wanted to look at a place, a spatial place as not just as a spatial environment. It is a place of economic drivers. It is a place of living. It's a place of biodiversity, ecology. So how can we activate a place as a transformational intervention approach to be able to manage or respond to cascading climate risks? So I'm looking at from a regenerative planning lens as well as transformational adaptation as the two framework to bring this together, and using urban experimentation or using place-based approaches, I wanted to look at what sort of approaches we can use to look at transformation adaptation for systemic change, which is highly ambitious. But I think rather than trying to fix different symptoms of the issue, systemic change is actually the ultimate driver. So this will become a pilot case study where we can at least start where to do that sort of changes. So this slide is actually provided to me from the university because this slide sort of captures some of my experience and some of my expertise as well. So I'm obviously very interested to join collaborative research in the Horizon Europe space as well. So if you find that New Zealand could be a partner in this area of research, I'm very happy to bring my expertise into the field, as well as if you find somebody else in New Zealand or from our Future Systems Research Center, actually, place a better place, maybe not. But here, as you see, there are different cluster 5 and destination 1, 4, and the New European warehouse facility is sort of the aligning area for my interest. So if you are developing a proposal, or if you're planning to develop a proposal for your Horizon Europe, or even if you just want to do some exchange research between New Zealand and Auckland, please feel free to get in touch with me, because for me, I think New Zealand, Auckland, and Ireland are very much comparable cities. From the scale, from the geographical location, temperature, weather, climate, I think and the climate-related risks as well. I'm sure flooding is also a huge issue here, as well as building places that are inappropriate for flooding is also an issue here. So I think there are very good transferable practices that we can compare. So this is my last slide. So my innovative techniques or methods are looking at more ecological planning from my work, as well as water-sensitive urban design, nature-based solution, climate adaptation justice is something I'm expert at, and participatory environmental co-designing, as well as regenerative planning. So these are my areas of expertise. So if you feel like if there's an opportunity, I'm most welcome. Thank you very much. Might be quite rushed, but I have so many other projects as well I can speak to, like urban heat and everything. But it's such a small time frame, and I appreciate the opportunity. But I'm here. Feel free to come and talk to me if you're interested in anything to talk further. And Owen, again, thank you very much for this time, and I appreciate it very much.